Tonight is a shir about a very interesting topic. Does everybody hear me? Good.
You have a microphone? No microphone.
No mic. So move closer. I don't bite.
You have a chair right next to you. Can you sit there?
You want to sit here? If you have the courage. Tonight is a very interesting shir about a very interesting topic, obviously. But it's also a topic which mystifies many people. You know, we take a look at the world and we're all stunned. What is happening? There are so many things happening on a daily basis that it's, in many ways, it's very difficult to comprehend. It is certainly very difficult to interpret through any meaningful framework about what is going on. Yet we know something is going on. We're all from a Yidden, we're all Orthodox, we live in the Torah. We know that nothing transpires without the will of God, without Ratzon Borei. Nothing. Therefore, clearly, what is happening has to be part of a divine plan. We know that. The mystery, of course, is what is that divine plan? What is its end? How do we understand so many things that is going on? Things which actually make absolutely no sense, no logic. Well, tonight what I'd like to do is provide that type of understanding. The ideas, the framework from the ideas that I will be introducing, the framework is Rabbi Moshe Mutzato, Ramchal, who's of course one of the greatest Kabbalists and Jewish thinkers in the last 500 years. So the framework that I employ is his framework, which I've been studying for many decades and so on. However, the ideas obviously are not his because he obviously does not live today. He died in 1747. However, if somebody immerses in that system or framework, to a certain extent, one can what's called extrapolate certain ideas. One can actually have some type of a grasp. What is interesting is God is an incredible chess player. What is a chess player? You know, it's interesting. There are chess players that are called the grandmasters. These guys are at the top of the field. If you play chess with one of these guys and you move a pawn, how many moves can you anticipate ahead of you what is possible on that chessboard? It's an interesting question. And the answer is about 15 moves. And these guys look at a chessboard and they can figure out the possibilities 15 moves in advance. Now that's astounding. It's really incredible when you think about that. I like to think that the Hashem is a chess master. But the type of chess master he is beyond belief. Because what he does is he moves a pawn, okay, that takes place 1,000 years before. And that chess piece, which took place 1,000 years before, will bring about something that will happen 1,000 years hence. That is beyond belief. Everything is fully and completely orchestrated by God. It's an incredible thing to watch. So what I'd like to do is to try to talk about that, what is happening in the 21st century, and so on. I want to mention a disclaimer. I am not a prophet at all, although sometimes it sounds that way. But I'm not a prophet. Whatever I see and understand is based on learning Ramchal and Hashkafa for many, many years, decades, whatever, and so on. But I think you'll find it interesting. You do not have to agree with me at all. That's fine. However, I think you will find it interesting. I think it certainly will challenge the way you look at current events. And I think that if you read the newspapers, you're going to read it very differently than you've been used to doing until now. In any case, now, in order to get a grasp of the 21st century, clearly it's part of the divine agenda. Well, the real question, obviously, is what is the divine agenda? So you need to know something about that, or else a lot of the ideas that I will say are basically, they seem to be either arbitrary, or perhaps, who says, and so on. So let's just take a brief look at what's called the divine plan of creation. Very briefly, it has certain major points. The first point is that God created everything, the creation itself, for a single purpose, which is interesting. And that purpose is to benefit mankind with an incredible state of goodness, some incredible state where we will be privy to that environment. What is that state? What does he want? What is that state called Hatova, Shlema, perfect goodness? That state is the concept where we will be attached, so to speak, to him. Since he is perfect, therefore being attached to him gives us a perfection. Without going into the details of that perfection, it does something to our existence. And that's in many ways what happens in a future world. And he wants to do that. He wants us to be connected to him in such a way where our reality, our existence changes. And as a result of that change, we will experience something which at the present time we cannot comprehend at all. But whatever it is promised to be something which is beyond comprehension. And that concept is called Vekus, to be attached to his being in such a way that the experience that we have is beyond description. It's a very general statement, but I'll leave it at that. Concept of Hatova, goodness. And the Hatova, the goodness, is of course being connected to him. The next idea is God has to make a decision, so to speak. What is that decision? Well, is he going to give it to us as a gift? Or do we have to in some way earn this? Well, if you take a look around, obviously, we have to earn this type of gift. Without going into why that decision was made, but clearly that decision is critical. It is an incredible idea, and this is a world that in order to receive that type of existential experience, we need to earn that idea, that experience. The next question is, well, what do we do? If it's not a gift, if it's not a matana, and we have to earn it, what is the job? What is the task that we have to do? And in response to that task, we will have earned, so to speak, the divine attachment or the future world. And the answer to that is that what God did is very interesting. God is a being that pervades all existence. That's what it is. In any case, what he decided is that he will take an area of existence, and I am oversimplifying a lot of the ideas. He will take a certain area of the existence and conceal himself from that area. He will hide. That's called Hester. It is a concealment of the divine presence itself. And that's what he does. And he creates the creation in the area that he has now left. He is now absent in himself from that area. And this is now what's called the chisar, the deficiency that creation now has. It now has an area in which he is not revealed. And what he wants is to allow man, and that's his task, somehow to bring him back. That's what he wants. He wants to come back into that area that he removed himself from. And that is the task of mankind. So the deficiency itself is called Hester, concealment. And when God comes back as a result of the acts of mankind, that is called Ha'ora, enlightenment, illumination. And it's also called Tikkun. It's called rectification. What God wants is mankind to rectify, to repair, to restore creation the way it initially was. There you are, Hester and Ha'ora, or Hester and Giloi, revelation, and this is called Tikkun. I'm trying to put it in very simple terms, even though the simple terms are really accurate, but so far this is what's happening. The next thing we have to deal with is, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I bring God back? That is the central problem. So therefore what God did is very interesting. He said the following. He said, look, if you perform actions that indicate you believe in my existence, then that itself will bring me back. That's how he comes back. We need to do certain actions that testify, that declare that we believe he is, he exists. And as a result of that actions, in response to that, measure for measure, he will come back. What are these acts that testify to his existence? These acts in general are called mitzvahs. That's what a mitzvah is, basically, without going into 613 and so on. But essentially speaking, very simply, a mitzvah is nothing more than a declaration or a testimony that you believe that God is, and that you declare that you believe he is. And you are willing to submit to his will because you believe his will is supreme, actually the only will that exists. When a person does that, whether he does that in thought or act or speech, doesn't make a difference, then that is what's called the mechanism that brings God back. It's really very simple. So when you conform behaviorally, when you will act as if God exists by declaring, testifying that you believe he does, that itself is the instrument or the vehicle or the mechanism to bring him back. Very important concept. Therefore, that concept is called edus yichudoi. It is a testimony that you believe he is the only one, the supreme being. Where do we see this? We see this in Shema Yisrael. It says Shema Yisrael, we know that is a statement which is the fundamental belief statement of Jews. Hear Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. If you take a look, that's saying that we believe God is one in the sense that he's the one that controls all of creation. If you take a look at the word ayin, Shema is large, and the dalet of echad is large in the Torah, you will see that it spells out ayin dalet, which is 8, testify. You need to testify that God is one. If you do that, then just take a look at these two letters again, but reverse it. There's a dalet and there's an ayin. Just reverse the letters, and that is dalet ayin, which is da. You will know that. In other words, if you testify to his oneness, to the supremacy of his existence, that itself is what is the reward. That is what you will receive. Nice. It's a nice structure. You know, you can, each area of this structure, you can develop an entire shir. But fundamentally, this is the overview of the divine plan. He wants to come back. You need to believe that he is. You need to testify by doing acts in that vein, and he will come back. This, then, is the fundamental design. However, there's what's called a caveat. What is that? Because God knew that many people will not do the mitzvahs. They will not declare that he is the supreme being or the only being. Therefore, what God did, in his great, incredible mercy, Rahmanis, he declared that I'm going to provide a second tikkun device. A second device, okay, which also will testify to who I am, in case they don't do enough mitzvahs. What device is that? That is called tshuva. Repentance is a very interesting phenomenon. And what it essentially does is when you repent, you retract the original testimony. When you sin, essentially you're saying, I can do whatever I want because I am supreme. Also, when you do tshuva, you are retracting that testimony. You are instead saying the reverse, that no, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, you're the only one. So therefore, tshuva is a secondary device that will bring God back. And that's because of the great Rahmanis of God. But God knew that people are not going to do what? They're not going to do tshuva. They will neither do mitzvahs and they won't do tshuva, which is unfortunately what goes on, unfortunately, in a great deal of Jewish history. So therefore, God, in his tremendous attribute of Rahmanis, said, I need to make a third device. It's called a third tikkun device. Remember what tikkun is? Tikkun is the restoration, to repair, to rectify or correct an existential flaw, which is his absence, which he created. What is that third device? That third device is called suffering, or yisurim. Suffering is not related necessarily to punishment, although it looks that way. The real concept of suffering is that it is another device to do the tikkun. When a person suffers, without going into what the mechanism or the rationale is, what happens is he also brings God's presence back. So you have three tikkun devices: mitzvahs, tshuva, and yisurim, mosai. In any case, this is the fundamental understanding of the divine plan itself. The second idea you need to know is this. What exactly does it mean that God created the world? Well, what it means is this, is that God emits, whatever that means, 10 forces. In Kabbalah, they are referred to as spheres. These are 10 forces which actually can create because they emanate, so to speak, from God. And what they do is they create a reality. They create a reality which is what? Which is Olam Haba. The first reality that was created is the future world, not this world. And what happened is that these forces diminished, so to speak. Not in reality, but it apparently diminished. And as a result of that, these forces will create a second reality which is diminished in stature to the first. And then they created a third reality, a fourth, and a fifth. These four of them are what's called the spiritual dimensions, and the last one is this world, basically. It is Olam Hazeh, this world. So these forces actually create reality, and they sort of like diminish, and as they diminish, the realities have much less of a stature, and therefore there are different realities. And the last reality they created was called Olam Hazeh, which of course is this world. Now we begin to understand what happens. What the mechanism is, or what happens when you do a mitzvah. When you do a mitzvah, what happens? You then bring down forces that are diminished, and they now are restored to their full power, their full wattage, if you want to use an electrical example and so on. And what happens is they, because they are restored, so to speak, they begin to change reality, which is astounding. So therefore, when a person testifies to the fact that he believes in God, what that does is it empowers these forces to begin to, again, regain their strength, so to speak, and they begin to change reality. The first reality they change is Olam Hazeh, this world. That's right. It is the job of the Jew, and now we begin to understand what we do. What we do is we empower those forces to become fully illuminated, and therefore reality as we know it changes. It reverses. The task of a Jew, and this is what tikkun is to retransform existence as we know it now into a much greater existence, ultimately into the future world. That's really what we do. We retransform, we change reality back into its former stature. And we do that through the mitzvahs, you see. Now, there's a secondary idea which comes after this. We now understand what a mitzvah does, that it enlightens or illuminates those forces, and we actually retransform the physical universe. In fact, what is interesting, as an aside, is that if somebody ever asks you, where is the future world? Olam Haba. Do you know where it is? It is here. Olam Haba isn't somewhere else. It is here. Except it's a physical universe that is completely retransformed into a spiritual nature. Exactly. It's over here. In fact, there's a sefer, a very important sefer in Kabbalah called the Sefer HaBahir, that says the following. If you want to say the future world, how do you say it in Hebrew? Well, everybody will tell you Olam Haba, right? But the Sefer HaBahir says that's a mistake. Because Olam Haba means the world that came. If you wanted to say the future world, you would say in Hebrew, Olam She Yavoy, the world that will come. When we say Olam Haba, what we're really saying is the world that came. Because the task of man is to change this world back into the world that came originally first, which is interesting. This is what the Sefer Ba'er says. And that clearly illustrates and exemplifies what our task is to retransform creation into its former state. Very important idea. Next idea. What happens if a person sins? This is the question. A person sins, what happens? Does that mean that, and I said when a person does a mitzvah, what happens is those spheres are empowered and they further are reinforced and they illuminate greater what's happening in this world. But what happens if a person sins? Does it mean that those forces or that state of Kedusha, that enormous energy, spiritual energy, does that mean it doesn't come down? It merely stays up? And there's no, not at all. What God did is something very interesting. The first man called Adam, his job was not to eat from the tree of tree, the Eitz HaChaim, whatever, and so on, or the tree of knowledge, good and evil, and so on. He was not supposed to eat from that tree. In any case, he did, and therefore God said to him is the following: your job was to ignore the advice of the primordial snake, which is called the Nachash HaKadmoni, the primordial snake. Don't listen to him, because he was trying to convince Chava and Adam, actually Chava, to eat from that tree with various arguments. What happened is they tried the tree, and as a result of that, they listened to the snake, and that snake was the mouthpiece of the Satan. The Satan, the famous Satan, the Malach that is always tempting us. And therefore, as a result of that, God said to them as follows: until now, your job was to ignore the advice of the Satan, which is ignore the advice of that primordial snake. However, since you listened to that snake, the Satan, your new job, and you now have a new job, your job is no longer to ignore the advice of the Satan, which is the mouthpiece is a snake. Your job is to destroy, to annihilate, to kill the Satan. That's right. You gave evil a place by listening to its argument. You now have to eradicate it. You need to annihilate and wipe it out. New job. But the problem is, how do you destroy a malach? How do you destroy an angel? The Satan. So what the Hashem did is very interesting. He changed the nature of the relationship between the Satan and man. What did he do? Everything that exists because there is a power, a spiritual energy, a shefa, hashpor, kedusha, whatever, that comes from the Ribono Shel Olam to everything that exists. It's like a cable. That cable is connected to you. Okay? And that power from God to you comes, so to speak, through that invisible cable. If somebody to walk over and cut that cable, you would instantly vanish. Because what sustains your existence is that force. Everything has that cable, so to speak. The Satan has that cable too, because he also needs God to exist. So does man. So what God did is he went over to the Satan, took a hold of his cable, so to speak, and cut it. Before the Satan vanished, he took the end of the cable of the Satan and he connected it to the cable of man. Adam Harishon. So the cable comes down from God, goes to one side, Adam Harishon, and the other side goes to the Satan. So now both Adam and the Satan are now connected to the same power source. Problem is, there's only enough Kedusha, power, to come down that can only, in many ways, energize only one side. There is not enough for two. Therefore, the relationship that man has with the Satan is called combat. What does that mean? Both vie for the same singular source. If Adam gets a source, and how does he do that? As I said, by doing the will of God, then that energy, that Kedusha, comes to him, and he grows in might. He grows in incredible success. Many incredible things happen to him, all of which are good. However, and what happens to the Satan? The Satan begins to die, because without that energy, he cannot sustain himself. And he gets sick, so to speak. Then he got to check into the ICU, check into the hospital, and then he's dead. What happens if man sins? So that energy which would have come down as a result of his mitzvah now goes to the Satan. Exactly. It doesn't just go back. It goes to the other side, the Sitra Achra, the Satan. And he becomes energized. And the Satan grows in might. We, however, or the Adam Rishon, and the Jews now replace Adam, Jews grow weak. They have all kinds of problems, sorrows, and so on. This then is the relationship. But as I've said, there's only enough power to come down from one side. It's either us or it is him. That's the way it's set up. Therefore, if that's the case, if we do the will of God, the Ratzon HaBoreh, then what happens is the Satan gets sick, he gets weak, and if all the Jews do the Ratzon HaBoreh, he dies. Literally. So therefore, man can fulfill that second task, which is to eradicate evil. But the interesting thing about it is that we actually give life to evil because he takes our holiness or our energy as a result of the fact that we sin. If we didn't sin, we would take it, he would collapse. This is the relationship. Therefore, the relationship between us and the Satan is what's called combat. Very important relationship. It's like a seesaw. When we are up, he is down. And when we are down, because we sin, he is up. It's called a reciprocal relationship that we have with the Satan. This is a very important concept. How do we take back the energy from the Satan? Because we have now two jobs. One job is to take the energy back, which he stole from us. As a result of our sins, we need to take it back into our area. And then once we've taken it back, we need to bring down the rest. Therefore, mankind, or the Jewish people, have two jobs. One is to clean out the Satan of whatever energy he stole from us. And the second job is to bring down the Kedusha. Two jobs. Very important concept. But how do we take back this stuff from the Satan? Basically, we take it back by doing tshuva, because he got it by our sinning. We do tshuva, we take it back. And if we suffer, we take it back also. Therefore, the last 4,000 years has been a contest between us and the Satan. Where is the balance of this Kedusha? Is it by us, depending on the mitzvahs we do, and on the repentance, the tshuva, or on the suffering? Or is it by him, because of all the sins we do? This is the great shikol, or balance of creation, which is critical to understand the entire all human events are based on this balance, as you will see. Once you understand that, you now understand a very important formulation of the divine agenda. What is our job? When we do our job, which is the mitzvahs, okay, that we bring down an enormous amount of energy, which can now retransform creation back into its original status, called the future world. We understand that. We also understand the concept of what? Of the Satan, that we are in a terrible relationship with the Satan for the sole purpose of destroying evil. And the relationship is that if we do mitzvahs, we survive and we flourish. If we sin, he survives and he flourishes, and to our detriment, we suffer terribly in all kinds of problems, whether it be parnaso, or shidduch, or marriage, whatever it is. That is a result of the fact that he fundamentally has an enormous amount of what's called divine energy. But that's his right. Now, because that's justice, measure for measure. You don't want to do the mitzvahs? You think that you're somebody special because you are doing the averis? Fine. Then I will show you that there are other powers in this world. It's measure for measure, and therefore the Satan then has that. Now, when the Satan grows in might, and by the way, the Satan is the only angel that can grow. It's like the moon. It can wax and wane. The only one that can do that are Jews. The only angel that can do that is the Satan. All angels are fixed at their level of creation that they were created at. And that's it. They can either go up, they cannot go down. They're fixed. However, the Satan is a being, because he is dependent on us for his existence, he can go up and down just like we can go up and down. So therefore, this is the relationship that we have with the Satan. And what's important to understand is when the Satan does achieve enormous power because of the sins of the Jews, then what does he do with that power? He gives it to the nations of the world. Without going into that extensively, and all history, human history, is based on where is the power? Is it by us or is it by him? But I'm not going to go through many different events of history. I want to dwell on the 21st century. Where is it now? And that's the critical understanding of how we understand what is going on. So that's how he gives forth, he creates agents called the Umas Ha'olam, the nations of the world. And as a result of that, they are then able to persecute the Jews. They are able to punish the Jews, persecute them, kill them, you name what. And because the power is now with him that we have given him as a result of the fact that we do not do the will of God, nowhere near what we really should do. This then is the basic structure of creation. And it explains really all history of man. It certainly explains Jewish history. So we now have achieved a milestone that we now know basically what the fundamental structure is. Now what happens? If the Satan is now empowered, and like I said, the contest between Jews and the Satan is 6,000 years old. With the Jews, it's 4,000 years old. Because the power to either enliven or enable the Satan to do what he does is only in the hands of the Jew. There is no nation in the world that can in any way ennoble or enable the Satan to do whatever he does. It is only through our power source, our Kedusha, our holiness, that he gives him, that he's able to do it. So, if the Satan becomes powerful, okay, there are 8 nations that he can appoint to do the business of having the Jews suffer. What are the 8 nations? This is critical to understand world history, certainly Jewish history. The first nation, or the first satanic agent, so to speak, is Egypt, Mitzrayim. They're the first. The second is Babylon, Bavel. The third is Persia, Paras. The fourth is Greece. The fifth is Rome. And an understanding of all these nations is really what Jewish history is all about. But I must add that in the end of days, there are 3 more nations that come into the fore. You had Egypt, which was the first. Then you had the 4 called the Arba Shibudi Malchus, the 4 nations that would subjugate the Jews. Okay, and like I mentioned, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Forget about who Rome is for a minute. Obviously, there's no Rome, whatever. But there are 3 additional nations. Who are they? One is the Amalek. Amalek is a nation that is really, it can start out as a grandson of Esau and so on. But Amalek is the worst of all the nations, but he is one of them. Without getting to who is it now, who is it today, and so on, you have Amalek. The second one is Ishmael, who we know as the Muslims or the Arabs. And the third is not a nation. It is Jews that want to destroy the uniqueness of the Jewish people by declaring that the Torah is not special. Okay, the Jews don't need the Torah at all. The Jews have gefilte fish, cholent. It's the culture that makes a Jew. Or it's Israel that makes a Jew. It is not the Torah. And these are called the Erev Rav, as it says in the prophet, that from within you will come the enemy. Who's from within you? It is the Erev Rav. That's what they're called. And the Erev Rav does not refer to Jews. It refers to the leaders that want to, in some way, get the Jews to believe in themselves, not as a unique nation based on its covenant or agreement with God, but based on its culture, just like every other nation. Those are the Erev Rav. So we have 8 nations. These are the nations that the Satan, in many ways, partners with them in order to bring an enormous amount of problems to the Jews. That's a very important idea. And the history of the Jewish people is really about those 8 nations. In this year, I'm going to dwell really on basically the last 3, because that's really what's happening. As we get closer to the end of time, it is these 3 nations or peoples that really come to fore. The first, of course, is Yishmael. Muslims are the Arabs. The second is the Erev Rav, or those Jews that want to lead other Jews astray. And then you have Amalek. These then are the 3 nations that specifically at the end of time, they have the major share in what goes on today. Now, how do we understand what is going on today? Well, once we understand this, the concept then of these 8 nations, we can actually begin to understand what the problem is today and why there's such an incredible amount of problems for Jews. And not only that, what is happening and why.
Is the United States? Amalek.
No, of course not. Hold on.
Oh, it's the Knesset?
Let me just go a little more into it, a couple of these ideas, and then I'm going to go on today, what is happening now, and who's who in these characters, and so on. The Erev Rav. What is an Erev Rav, really? I mentioned it is a Jew, not a Jew himself, but the leaders of Jewish people that want to lead Jews astray. What's the origin of this? The origin goes way back to Yaakov and Esav, where Yaakov was about to meet Esav, and he was enormously afraid. Vayira Yaakov mi'oid, was very afraid because Esav was coming to kill him. So Yaakov Avinu prays, and this is a very interesting concept. He says, Hatzileni no, save me. Miyad Ochi, from my brother, Miyad Esav, from Esav. Now we know Esav is the brother of, right? Esav is Ochi, so why does it have to say Miyad Ochi, Miyad Esav? So what Yaakov was saying, a very profound concept. He's saying, look, you need to save me from Esav. Who, by the way, Esav, of course, was Jewish, because his mother was, Rivka, and so on, and Rivka, whatever, and so on, right? So as a result of that, Esav really is Jewish, although eventually he'll become not Jewish, whatever that means. So what Yaakov said, listen, you need to save me from Esav when he comes disguised as my brother, or when he comes, obviously, in his real form as Esav. What does it mean, my brother? The problem with Esav, when he comes as a brother, is you don't know him as an enemy, because he's my brother. Why would a brother want to kill me? You see? So Esav as a brother is incredibly dangerous. Far more dangerous than as Esav when he comes openly to try to kill me. The concept of Ochi is an Erev Rav. What does that mean? An Erev Rav is a Jew that wants to kill you. Not that he wants to kill you openly, and he doesn't even believe he wants to kill you. That's not even the issue. What he wants to simply do is convince you that you and God have nothing in terms of a relationship. That the real uniqueness of the Jewish people has nothing to do with Torah or the covenant or the agreement. What he wants to say is what? Is that the idea of the relationship to you and God, that there is no real relationship. Basically, it's Jewish culture. In any case, that's Ochi. Why is that so dangerous? Because why is cancer so dangerous? Because the problem is cancer is not a foreign agent. It is a human cell. It is a cell. Your own cell that all of a sudden rebels and doesn't die, and it keeps multiplying until it usurps all the nutrients of the body, and a person dies from starvation. That's how cancer kills a person. It takes everything that should have gone to the healthy cells, and it takes it for himself. The problem is the cancer cell never dies, so it just keeps taking and taking and so on. Therefore, what that means is that a tumor, the body does not recognize it as an enemy, and therefore the tumor can kill the body. An Erev Rav, unfortunately, is in many ways like a tumor. You don't recognize that this person wants to kill you, not that he wants to do that, but whether wittingly or unwittingly, he's destroying your spirituality. He's destroying your entire connection to the future world. That is the Erev Rav. And throughout history, there have been many Jews that have been the Erev Rav, and so on. Today, we know who the Erev Rav is, and so on. I mean, in America, you have the Reform, the Conservative, Reconstructionists that clearly want to sever the connection you have with God. At least they don't think so, but of course, that's what they do. In Israel, you have many of the parties which are anti-religious, or they want to destroy the Jewish connection to his spirituality and his Torah, and so on. That's an Erev Rav. It's important to know that idea, the concept of an Erev Rav. Yishmael, we know. The Yishmael, the Arabs, which of course are really Yishmael, but today Yishmael is not just Arabs, it really is Muslim, Islam. Only 10% of all Muslims are Arabs. The other 90% are not Arabs, they are just Muslims. For instance, Indonesia, they are not Arabs, yet that whole country is Muslim. In fact, that's the greatest Muslim Islamic nation in the world, is Indonesia. The Turks are Muslims, right? The Iranians are Muslims, but they are not Arab. In any case, Islam today fundamentally is what Yishmael is. So we know who they are. In any case, let us now take a look that we have an understanding of this and see what is going on today. What is happening today, we are getting very close to the end. Very close to the end. And what is happening is simple. The Jews over 4,000 years, through the mitzvahs they've done, through the repentance they've done, and through the suffering that they've done, have taken back 98% of the energy of the Satan. That means the Satan is dying. That's right, he is dying. It's hard to believe, but the Jews, it took them almost 4,000 years. But at the end of time, what happens is the Jews succeed in removing all the power, and then Satan is dying. Now, when somebody's dying, they take all kinds of desperate moves, desperate measures. And that, in many ways, is what is happening today, as we will see. The Satan really is dying. And as such, he is desperate. What does that mean? That means he needs to employ strategies that will enable him to survive. The problem is, the only way for him to survive is to get the Jews to sin. That's called yoinek. The Satan is yoinek. He nourishes off the holiness of the Jewish people, the energy, the spiritual energy of the Jewish people, and that's the only way he could survive. So therefore, the Satan, in many ways, is like a general. Imagine a general is fighting a war with an enemy, and the general discovers that he only has 1 week's left of firepower. That's all he has left. So what does he do? He's desperate. He knows after 1 week, it's over with. He lost the war. So there are only 3 strategies that he can do. The first strategy is called the Great Bluff. What is the Great Bluff? He will fire 6 days of that firepower, and he only got 1 day left, against the enemy. So the enemy, he's hoping, will be so frightened by this massive display of firepower that they will sue for peace. It's a strategy, but it's risky. And what happens? Let's assume that the enemy doesn't go for it, they don't buy it, they don't care, and meanwhile this guy is now out 6 days, and he's only got 1 day of firepower left, and that's it. So he's got a second strategy. What's a second strategy? Is that many times if you go into an enemy and somehow destroy their resolve to make war, that is another strategy, like Vietnam, where there are many people saying, we don't want a war, we don't want a war in Afghanistan or Vietnam, so those are called dissidents. So this person, this general, sends his guys into the camp of the enemy, and they try to break the resolve of the enemy to make war. That's a second strategy. What happens if that doesn't work? Then there's only one strategy left. He needs to call up an ally and say, listen, I don't have anything left. You need to send me new armaments, maybe new troops and so on, or else it's over with for me. Those are three strategies that somebody fighting an enemy can employ. What does the Sultan do? The exact same thing. But what is the strategy of the Sultan? Let's take a look. The first strategy is called the Great Bluff, where you send 6 days of firepower to try to convince the enemy that you have plenty left. What is that? What historical event corresponds to the Great Bluff? And the answer is the Holocaust. The Holocaust has many reasons, and I will go into one. One of them is called the Great Bluff. What does that mean? What the Sultan did is very interesting. He marshaled all the nations of the world, and that's really what happened in the Holocaust, to destroy the Jewish people. Whether the Nazis and the Germans, the Ukrainians, the Poles, you name it. Even America refused entry to the Jews. Britain issued the white paper. I'm not going to go into the other thing, but basically the entire world was against the Jew, in one way or another. That's the Great Bluff. Now, what did the Sultan want to accomplish? To kill the Jews? Not really. Doesn't gain anything by killing Jews. But what he did, what he was hoping, is that the Jews would say, where is God? And therefore they would say, forget about it. We no longer have the agreement with God, right? He has abandoned us, and therefore the Jews will now go back, or rather sin, because they don't have a covenant anymore. Forget about the Torah. And then the Sultan would be yoineg, nourished from the sins of the Jews. That's what he was hoping. Did it work? No. In the beginning, it worked to a certain extent, okay? But basically, people began coming back to Judaism. So the Sultan realized that it's over with. I used all my guys, didn't work. It didn't work totally. Many Jews did not buy it, and religion is now resuming the way it was. So therefore the Sultan used the second strategy. What is that strategy? That strategy is called the dissidents. Who are the dissidents? The Erev Rav. So the Sultan has the Erev Rav, who are Jews themselves. And he gives them success because he's able to, because he prosecutes the Jews in judgment, and he wins. And the Erev Rav are the people that found the state of Israel. And what do they do when they found the state of Israel? Since they want to be in power, what they do is have all the Jews coming to Israel, right? They put them in kibbutzim, which are completely irreligious, and they destroy an enormous amount of the religiosity and the spirituality of the Jews in the 40s and 50s. There's the Erev Rav. Those are his dissidents. That's his army. The Jews themselves. And they did a terrible damage to the Jews. Terrible. Of which the Jews themselves have never really covered. Just take a look. You go to Tel Aviv, what looks like Tel Aviv. You know, it's hard to believe you're in Israel when you walk down some of the streets in Tel Aviv. But these are the people whose parents and their parents were destroyed spiritually and religiously by the Erev Rav, which unfortunately to a great extent still flourish in the government of Israel. In any case, did it work? To a certain extent, yes, but it really failed. Because many Jews are still traditional, they light candles and so on, they do mitzvahs. It didn't really work the way he wanted it. They were not successful in eradicating Judaism. Not Jews, but they want to eradicate Judaism. Not Jews, but Judaism. They were not successful. Bad news for the Sultan. He's only got one strategy left. What's that strategy? He needs to go to an ally that has their own power source. But wait a minute, there is no other power source. Either the Jews have it, and if they sin, then the Satan has it. So what power source is there? And the answer to that is a very incredible concept. The Maharal says the following, that the only ones who can derive power from God, not through the Satan, is Yishmael. Yes, Yishmael. How? And the answer to that is because Avraham Avinu, when Avraham Avinu prayed to God, Yishmael yichyu lefonecha, let Yishmael live before you. What he was really saying is, let him live before you, let him derive his power, okay, from where? Not from the Satan, but from before you. And the Baruch Hashem said, I will accede to your request. That gave Yishmael an incredible power, which is similar to the Jews, or not just similar slightly, but nothing near what the Jew can do. What that meant is that Yishmael himself, if he does certain types of religious acts, whatever milah and so on, can actually bring down Kedusha to himself without having to go to the Satan. In fact, the word God only appears in two nations, Yisrael and Yishmael. Why? Because they have a relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom based on that. And also, which is interesting, is that you'll notice that Yishmael is not really out to convert Jews. They're not into conversion. They're into making the Jews submit and admit that they're dhimmis, which means inferior people. They don't care if the Jews convert, usually. However, when you look at Christianity, which is Edom, and who is Rome today? Well, it started off with Esau. Esau became Edom, the Torah says. Edom, the Gemara says, is Romi, Rome. Rome was transformed from a nation into a religion, without going into why. That is Christianity. Christianity is Western civilization. But you'll notice that the Christians, they're not interested in the Jews submitting. They want the Jews to convert. Why? Because the Malach of Esau is the Satan, and the only way the Satan can eat is if the Jew sins. So therefore the Christian has to get the Jew to sin, and therefore their angel can eat. That's the difference. It's amazing how intuitively they know that fact. Whereas Yishmael doesn't really care. In any case, what we see here is that what? Is that the Satan is dying, and the third area is he needs the power of Yishmael. So what does the Satan do? He goes over to Sarai Shel Yishmael. Every nation has an angel. And he goes over to the angel of Yishmael, and he says, okay, I need you guys, because I'm always bankrupt. So the Yishmael says, okay, what would you like? Well, I need your assistance. Okay? So Yishmael, or the angel of Yishmael, says a very interesting concept. He's okay, no problem, I'll make a deal with you. But here's the deal. Until now, your nation was the Bechor. The firstborn, or the greatest nation of the Satan is Edom, or Esau, or Christianity. And so on. I want to do that for my nation. I want Yishmael, the Arabs, to be the greatest nation. Are you agree or not? So the Sultan, of course, said, no problem. I mean, it probably was a problem, but he agreed. Therefore, lo and behold. And by the way, this fundamentally took place on Tafshin Nun, which is September or Rosh Hashanah of 1989. Without going into why, I don't think I have the time for that. But fundamentally, that's what took place. And all of a sudden, just around that time, it's incredible. All of a sudden, you had the first Intifada. All of a sudden, that was the incredible growth of the Arabs. Until finally Oslo, and so on. And wherever you look, there are Arabs. You take a look at Europe. Europe is slowly turning into a Muslim state. You know, it's no more London, it's Londonistan, right? Eurasia and so on. The nations of Europe are becoming slowly Muslim. Without getting into the logistics of it all, but they are turning slowly, because the mistake that they made, that's the historical concept. They thought that if somebody goes into Western Europe, they will become a European. But a Muslim never becomes anything but a Muslim. And that's the mistake they made. In any case, therefore, Europe is changing. The U.S. is also, there are many Muslims in the U.S. And Islam is slowly taking over the world. There are 2 billion Christians, but there are 1.5 billion Muslims, which is astounding when you think about that. But the most incredible feat that I have ever seen is that once the Malach of Yishmael said, we want to become the firstborn, we want to become the elite nation, not Esav or Christianity, and the Sultan said, okay, and guess what? Who would ever have imagined that America, which is Christian, which is Edom or Esav, would actually have a president who's a Muslim? That's where Obama comes from. The incredible thing is that you now have a Muslim who's the president of the United States. And what is he doing to the U.S.? He's fundamentally destroying the United States. And that's his job. In fact, fundamentally the job of Obama, okay, is really in many ways to neuter or nullify or enormously diminish the stature of Edom, Esav. And that's exactly what the Sarai Shel Yishmael wanted. The incredible thing is, how in the world did this guy become president? And of course, that was a divine act. Because the way he became president is a miracle. I mean, you can't believe, you look at it, you can't believe a guy, without going into all the negatives and so on, a guy like this guy who hangs around with communists and rebels and so on, and his greatest claim to fame is that he's a community organizer in Chicago. Like, what is this? You know, how does a guy like this become president of the United States? And therefore, it's miraculous. And how did he do it? Because Mina Shemayim, he was designated. So God is not interested in votes. He doesn't need votes to do what he wants to do. He put in the mind of the American people. In fact, what he did was astounding. What Obama went through, okay, wasn't a dedication to become president or whatever. It was a coronation. They looked at him as the Messiah. That's the extent that the Rebbe Shalom brainwashed the American people. And that's not the first time he did it, by the way. He did it to Clinton, good old Bill Clinton. He did the exact same thing, where he brainwashed. I mean, this man was so filled with scandals, it was just impossible to believe that he could ever become president. I don't want to go into all the scandals or whatever. But Bill Clinton, who was basically a nobody from nowhere, you think of Arkansas, who ever heard of Arkansas, and so on, you know, but he miraculously became the president, even with all the scandals. And there's an incredible reason why. Because the job of Clinton, ultimately, was to remove the fear the Arabs have of the Jews. That's really what it's all about. And therefore, everything Clinton did was in that service. He allowed Arafat to go into the White House more times than any other representative of any other people. And of course, you know, Oslo happened under him and so on and so forth, which legitimatized the Arab claim and so on. I don't want to go into the whole thing of Clinton, but fundamentally, he also was miraculously made president in order that the Arabs should no longer fear Israel. And that's what Oslo did. It legitimized their claim. And then Arafat, he gave him respect. Then the UN gave Arafat respect. There are many, many different historical events that have happened since Clinton that have removed the fear that the Arabs have of Jews. And the Rebbe wants that, as you will see why. But presidents are there because God needs them to do specific purposes. And the purpose of Obama is threefold. One, to diminish the stature enormously of the United States. That's one. The second thing is to enable the Arabs to achieve ascendancy over the Jews, which he has done. You notice an incredible double standard that he's always giving. It's unbelievable to watch this, to watch Obama. Today what he's doing is beyond belief. Forget, without even getting into Iran. But he always sides with the Arabs. He sided with Morsi and Egypt, which is ridiculous, because Morsi was destroying Egypt, and the Muslim Brotherhood is an extremist organization. Yet instead of siding with al-Sisi, that is saving Egypt, he sides with Morsi, which is the Muslim Brotherhood, and so on. He sides with everybody else but the Jews. And everybody today sees that. And the third job, as we will see, is of course, is Iran. And Iran is critical to the end of time. as we will see. But in any case, he's doing his job, which is really very interesting, that this is exactly what is happening. Okay, so we now understand Obama, what he's doing to the United States, why the Arabs are taking over the world, or I should say the Muslims are taking over wherever you look, they're taking over, and so on. But that was the bad news. The good news is that the Islam is dying also, because we are going to the end of time. Islam is dying. Forget about Esau. He's dying anyway. And the Sultan thought that the only way he's going to walk away with something is by partnering with Yishmael. But the truth is that Yishmael is dying, because even they are running out of whatever power they've taken. They're also running out of it. Where do we see this? In certain incredible moments. One, take a look. Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. They're all falling apart. Every one of those states has a major damage being done to them. They're collapsing. I'm not even talking about Libya and Syria, which are gone. They're not even countries anymore, you know. But Jordan is in enormous danger of being taken over. All the refugees are coming into Jordan, which has destabilized the entire economy. Turkey, all of them. Lebanon, taken over by Hezbollah and so on. They're all being destabilized, which is amazing. Where do you see that? Or what does that mean? If that's happening, it means that the Yishmael and the angel of Yishmael, the Saraj of Yishmael, he is running bankrupt. That's what it means. They are losing their ability to really, in many ways, threaten the world, certainly to threaten the Jews. In fact, the threat is no longer from the Arab nations. Israel is no longer worried about the Arab nations. They're so busy collapsing, they can't even get an army together to do anything to Israel. Their concern now is the Iran itself. But the second thing you see, which is interesting, is that the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the spearhead of Yishmael, these are the guys into the theology of Yishmael. Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood, they're killing him. The Egyptians are after the Muslim Brotherhood, which is unbelievable. It's like they're turning against the theology of Islam. Because whether you agree with them or not, these guys represent the Quran, the Sharia law in its most emphatic form, yet they are being destroyed. What does that tell you? That Yishmael is dying. Because that would never happen if they were not dying. So you see the collapse of the nations. You see the collapse of the theocracy or the theology of the Muslim Brotherhood. And also you see something else which is very interesting. Where does the power of the Arabs lie, really? Where does it lie? It lies basically in shemen, oil. Without that, who would ever listen to an Arab? If he didn't have oil, who would ever listen to the Arabs? Why would anybody want to listen to a guy in a bedsheet? Of course not. What makes them powerful is their oil. That's what does it. So what happens? So Hashem is now going to destroy them. How? First of all, he has America becoming the largest producer of oil in the world because they have learned how to take shale oil out of shale, which is oil from the rocks. It's called fracking. America is now the greatest oil producer in the world. America doesn't even really need oil from the Middle East. So therefore, they don't have any political interest really in the Middle East, except the real interest is anti-Semitism. But put that on hold for a minute. In any case, and not only that, Israel, they have now discovered, Israel is now about to become an exporter of energy. The Leviathan field, and so on, the Tamir fields, they say there's enough gas there to supply Israel with 100 years of energy. And that means Israel is no longer dependent. Not only that, Israel is a major sponsor or exporter of oil, or rather gas. And not only that, they've discovered oil south of Jerusalem as shale. I mean, Israel is about to take its place in OPEC, which is interesting. This doesn't happen by accident. What this means is that the ascendancy of the Arabs is dying, whether they be states, the theology, and even their power that comes from gas and oil. Look, open your eyes and see what's happening. The Hashem is now diminishing them, but the reason why they're being diminished is, again, because their power is going. So the Satan, if you think he was going crazy before, you have no idea what he's doing now. He is absolutely ballistic. He's going bonkers. In fact, I heard that he's on a massive dose of Prozac. That's how depressed he is. However, the Satan's IQ is off the charts. Never tangle with him. What is he going to do? I will tell you. The Satan doesn't have the energy himself. He doesn't have Am Yisrael, because they're both collapsing. What's the Satan do? The Satan goes, opens up the file of the Jewish people, and he looks. And unfortunately for us, there's always something, a major flaw or sin that the Jews are always doing. And he grabs it. What is the major flaw? What is the major chet, sin, that the Jews are involved with? Fundamentally, it is called sinas chinam. Sinas chinam, baseless hatred. Whether it be expressed as machloikis, arguments, where one person feels he's elite over the other person, where one Jew doesn't accept the other Jew because his minhagim are different. There is an enormous amount of sinas chinam. Sinas chinam destroyed the second base of Mikdash. Not only that, is the major reason why Mashiach doesn't come, as we will see. So therefore the Satan takes a look, and he's makatre, prosecutes the Jews. He gets up and says, I don't believe what's happening. You want to give these guys what? Merit? These guys hate each other. They're always arguing. They speak Lashon Hara about each other all day long. And Lashon Hara, of course, always brings sinas chinam. Why do they deserve anything? Unfortunately, he won. The Satan won in Bezdin. How do we see this? Remember, because he has to get the Jews to sin, because it's not coming from anywhere else. He won in Bezdin, like he usually does when he pulls out the avera of Lashon Hara, sinas chinam. What does he do? So the Bezdin, the minor rules, you got a point there. Therefore, we give you permission to do certain things. What is that? Measure for measure. What is that? All of a sudden, there arises a politician, okay, that is incompetent fundamentally. It's a ness how he even got to the position. In fact, it's a ness how he got 19 seats. His name is Lapid. Yes, Lapid is, what is this man? He got 19 seats based on what? On an anti-Haredi platform. What is his desire? This isn't an accident. It's another miracle. You had Clinton, you had Obama, now you have Lapid. How's a man, I don't even know if he has a high school education. Whatever he is, how in the world can he become a finance minister, right? If you know nothing about finance. It's amazing what Israel does, and so on. In any case, what's Lapid's platform? Anti-Haredi. And what does he want to do? Take a look what he wants to do. And you see who's behind him. One, well, all these Shiva guys have to join the army. Well, what's going to happen? As Ben Gurion said, the army is the greatest social engineering vehicle. It will take any Jew and reduce his religion and make him either fry or give up Judaism or enormously diminish his zeal for Judaism. Ben Gurion said that. So he wants all the B'nai Torah, guys learning yeshiva, to do what? To join the army. And what's the objective? They will become fry or whatever. And therefore, what will happen? They will sin. And if they sin, he eats. Second thing, okay? He takes money away from all the frumah. All of a sudden they have no money. So what is he hoping? Well, if they have no money, what's going to happen? They're going to go to work. And if they go to work, they're going to become saturated with the Israeli environment, right? And they will also begin the downward trend of sinning. Well, there it is. Then the third attack is against the Beis Yaakovs. I want all the girls to have a Jewish education, which means secular studies. Why? Because he wants to destroy the entire concept of a Bais Yehudi, of a Jewish mother. Why do you don't you look at the Xeris? Do you think it's an accident? No. It's a Satan's kidrug that put Lapid there in the first place. It's astounding. And this guy is sitting there and he's a rabid anti-Haredi guy for the purposes of allowing the Satan to eat his dinner. That's fundamentally what's going on. Now, this is what he does. But the Rebbeinu Shem says, okay, you won in court, but watch what I do. Because our Father in heaven is always with us. He's always that way, right? So the Rebbeinu Shem does something unbelievable. Think about it. And now you understand what is happening. The chess pieces. All of a sudden, he's got to counter the kitrug, or the prosecution of the Satan, which is sinas chinam, right? Which is anti-Haredi, right? And the prosecution is what? Is sinas chinam. There's no Avos Yisrael, there's no Achdus, there's Machlokes, there's Lashon Hara. So Hashem says, watch, I'm going to create an event that's going to reverse the sinner and create an unbelievable Achdus to go against what the Satan is doing. And what is that? Unfortunately, but it happened a little more than a year ago, 3 teenagers were kidnapped. What was the result? Now, I don't know why they were kidnapped, in terms of why they, but what was the result of the kidnapping? It was an unbelievable event that brought all the Jews together. It was an achdus that we have not seen for decades. Why? Was this an accident? Of course not. Because what the Baruch wants to remove is the prosecution by bringing in an unbelievable achdus in Klal Yisrael, which happened. It was incredible to watch. People, secular people, couldn't believe the achdus that they had for the Haredim. And to top that off, what the Baruch did, to make sure it's going to work, is he brought a war on Israel. And there's nothing that unites people in Israel like a war with the Arabs. It's all for the achdus. Fundamentally, that's what it was, as a counter of Lapid. And now, as soon as the achdus took place, guess what? Netanyahu fired Lapid. Why? Because he lost. His whole kidrug, right? The prosecution of sinas chinam was gone. And therefore, both Lapid and Livni, both were fired because the Satan couldn't empower them anymore because the Satan lost. Remember, always pay attention to what's going on up there, not down here. Down here is always a result of what goes on up there. And therefore, all of a sudden, they're gone. Because Klal Yisrael had gone into a tremendous period of achdus. And in many ways, that's what saved the Jewish people. When you really think about it, it's really amazing. Just the sequence of events. Once you have an understanding of the dynamics of what is happening, fine. What is happening now? There's a medrash. There's a very interesting medrash. It's in the Yalkut Shimoni. It's brought in other places that says the following: B'shavua b'Shem ben David bo, in the week that Mashiach ben David comes, in the week, doesn't mean necessarily the week, but it could mean the Shemitah year, the cycle. It says that Poras, Persia, aka also known as Iran, they will conduct they will incite Arabia, okay? And Arabia will consult with Edom, and then it says that Poras will begin to destroy the world. Machris kol ha'olam. It's a medrash. Persia will begin to destroy the world. And the Jews, it says, are going to be incredibly confused and frightened. And they're going to run back and forth saying, what do we do? And all of a sudden, a baskoil, a divine voice, will come out and say, don't worry. Higia zman geulatchem. The time of your redemption has arrived. Unbelievable. The time of the redemption has arrived, which means that this war that Persia will incite against the world is the end of basically the wars of the world against Israel. Basically. That's amazing. That means that what is happening now with Iran, this is the end. That's what it means. We are looking really, we can now calculate the end. Because according to that medrash, first of all, it's astounding how the medrash knew. How could a medrash written 2,000 years ago know that Persia can even threaten the world? Persia? It's ridiculous. Who knew that Persia would acquire a nuclear weapon, right? And therefore they can easily threaten the entire Europe and the entire world. They can easily threaten. And the Medrash knew this 2,000 years ago. Therefore, the whole concept now of Persia in many ways signifies or signals the beginning of the end, which is absolutely astounding. And therefore, they must become nuclear. And now we understand another concept of Obama. Not only is Obama the President of the United States to destroy or clearly to diminish the stature of the United States, not only is he there in order to enable the Arabs' ascendancy over the Jews and double standards, but his real idea is to do what? Is to enable Iran to finish off the globe. That is why he is the president. He doesn't know that. But the amazing thing is the Hashem always knows exactly what to do. He takes a guy like Obama, who's really incompetent. His resume, he couldn't get a job as a CEO in a small company, let alone the United States of America. He has nothing to show. Okay? How does a man like that become the president? Because the Hashem needs to have him in. And he's putting in a guy that's incompetent. Why? Because Obama is desperate for a legacy. Because he knows he's a failure, basically. Most of the United States is against him, the Congress and so on. He needs a legacy. So therefore, that legacy is blinding him. Could you imagine giving weapons to a nation that is the greatest sponsor of terrorism in the world? You know, it's like walking over to a mafia guy and saying, by the way, would you like a machine gun to finish your job? Well, it's abnormal. It boggles the mind how a person not only endangers the Middle East, because they will now get $150 billion. They will now begin to what? Supply arms to Hezbollah, Hamas, and so on. But the whole Middle East is now going to become nuclear, because everybody's going to have nuclear weapons in order to counter the Shiites. Who can do this? And not only, he just threatened Europe, because nowhere in any of the agreements, I don't want to go through the whole thing, but it doesn't say anything about giving money to proxies, doesn't say anything about building what? Building missiles. They can still develop everything. They are going to threaten the world in 10 years, max 15. That is your countdown. And as far as I'm concerned, the main reason why Obama is president, because he's desperate for legacy, and that legacy blinded him and says, I'd rather go down in history with a legacy. I'm not interested in the survival of the world. Even though he says that, but he is now blinded totally by what he did. This is what's happening. So therefore, Iran signals the beginning of the end. That's amazing. Now, let me tell you something very interesting for those who don't know. There is an astronomical event called the blood moon. I don't know how many people have heard about this, but I will explain. You need to hear this. Okay. There's an astronomical phenomenon called a blood moon. What is a blood moon? A blood moon is fundamentally a lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse happens when the earth comes between the moon and the sun, so therefore blocks out the light of the sun that hits the moon. And therefore, this happens by full moon. The earth blocks the sun, and therefore the moon turns dark. Now, a lunar eclipse is relatively rare. It happens maybe once in a year, year and a half. It's a relatively rare phenomenon. So that's number one. A blood moon is when the moon in a lunar eclipse not just turns dark, it turns red, blood. That's why it's called a blood moon, which really turns orange, but it's called a blood moon. That's even rarer, that the moon should turn red instead of dark. Hey, that's incredible. What's even rarer than that is this. It is called a tetrad. What is a tetrad? A tetrad is this: when there are 4 consecutive blood moons, 4 of them, one after the other. For instance, there's 1, 6 months later there's 2, 6 months later there's 3, and 6 months later there's 4. That is extremely rare. What is even rarer, it is so rare that it happened only 3 times in 500 years. Is when the first blood moon happens the night of Pesach, the second blood moon happens the night of Sukkot, the third one happens again the night of Pesach the following year, and the fourth happens the night of Sukkot the following year. And it's 4 blood moons on Yom Tov itself, which is astounding. And it happened only 3 times in 500 years. Why is that so incredible? Because of this. Every time the blood moon happened, basically, there was a messianic advancement. The first one that is recorded is 1492. That's the first blood moon, basically. What happened in 1492, besides the Spanish Inquisition? What happened is Columbus set sail for America. Now, you don't realize that, but that's a messianic advancement. Why? Because Jews were suffering terribly in Europe. The Golas was terrible. By Columbus going to America, it would mean that the Golas would be primarily now, not only in Europe, but also in America, and the Golas in America is much better than the Golas in Europe. So therefore, that is a diminishment of the suffering of the Galut. That is a messianic advancement, because it means that the Golas is diminishing, which means a messianic advancement. That's the first time. The second time it happened was 1948, the establishment of the State of Israel. The third time it happened was 1967, when Israel got back Jerusalem. It's incredible. The fourth time is happening now. Last year Pesach was 1, Sukkot was 2. The Pesach that just happened now is 3, and this Sukkot will be the last blood moon of the Tetrad. Is something happening? If the previous 3 had what? Messianic advancements. Are we now going to see a messianic advancement? And the answer is yes. We've already seen it. You know what that is? The countdown to Iran. That is a messianic advancement. We're no longer saying, when will the Mashiach come? The Mashiach will come when Iran is going to conduct, right, incite the whole world war. That is a messianic advancement. Why? Because as I brought the Medrash, God says, Higiya zman gulaschem, right? The time of your redemption has arrived. This is it. And the incredible thing, it started this summer, in the 9 days. So therefore, it's no longer when is he going to come, who knows, but it's got to be within 10 years, or whatever, or 15, when we all know Iran is going to build a bomb, and therefore they're going to threaten the entire world, because they believe in they're Shiites, and as a result of that, they believe that the world has to be destroyed in order for the 12th Imam to come, which is suicide, which is lunacy. But they don't care. They already have 80, 90 million people, right? So we lose 30 million. Big deal. They're going to take out Israel, even if it means that Israel will bring nuclear weapons, because at most, so what are we going to destroy in Iraq? We'll destroy 20 million, 30 million, but they still have 40, 50 million to go. In Israel, it's over with for the entire thing. So they couldn't care less how many Iranians died. That's the amazing things about the Shiites and the Sunnis and so on. They're not concerned with life, human life. They are concerned with the messianic approach, which is they hold is the 12th Imam, and that can only come with the destruction, or a great deal of destruction, of the world. That's why, in many ways, we're dealing with crazies, because that's what they have to do. In any case, this is the countdown. The countdown is the greatest historical event Ruchni has ever known, because it signals an exact time when the Mashiach will come. Interesting. And this happened in the 4th blood moon, which is in many ways astounding. So, we now understand where we're headed. And Obama, in many ways, must do this. And that's why he was made President of the United States, to usher in many ways, the end. Next idea, which is very important. One of the things which is very important to understand, as we will see, is by Kriyas Yamsuf, God said to the Jews, because they were stuck, in front of them was a sea, in back of them was the Egyptian army. Where were they going to go? So what the Baruch Hashem said, something is very interesting. He said, wait a minute, don't do anything. I need you to watch the grand show. His Yatzvu Uru'u, stand and watch. It's Yeshua's Hashem, the salvation of God. Watch. It's an astounding statement by the Baruch Hashem. Because the Baruch Hashem is always concerned with what? With concealing himself. And here, he was going to actually do the war. You don't have to do anything, just watch. I will do everything. And he says, right? His Yatzvu Uru'u is Yeshua's Hashem. Stand back and watch the salvation of God. Hashem Yilochem Lochem. God will fight for you. V'atem tachrishim. Be silent. It's astounding. And what do we see? That God destroyed the Egyptians by himself in the face of everybody. That's one of the greatest revelations of the presence of God ever known. The second was of course, Matan Torah. But one of the greatest revelations of the awesome power of God was his destruction, miraculously, of the entire Egyptian army without one Jew lifting a finger. Do you know that we are seeing that now? God says to the Jews, listen, these guys are bankrupt. Esav is bankrupt. Edom, America. And by the way, that's why America is diminishing, because they're bankrupt. Christianity is bankrupt, as you see from many other things. And Yishmael is bankrupt. So God says, don't worry, watch. Since they are bankrupt, they no longer have any merits to argue their case. So what am I going to do? I'm going to have them kill each other. So we sit back and we watch. It's unbelievable. Egypt is killing Morsi. Libya is killing themselves. Syria is no longer a country. Sunnis and Shiites are wiping each other out. It's astounding to watch. It's like Israel doesn't even know what to do. You know, because they're paying soldiers, and the soldiers are basically doing what? The Arabs are killing themselves. It's incredible to watch. Isn't that Kriyas Yamsuf? But that basically can only happen really when the nations of the world are bankrupt and they have no schus. That's another indication that we are very close to the Messianic era. We are watching Hashem Yilochem Lochem. It's in front of our eyes. They're killing each other. And by the way, that's why God made 1,500 years ago the concept of Shiites and Sunnis. Remember I told you the porn? You know, he moved something 1,500 years ago that when they're ready, they can wipe each other out 1,500 years later. But who knew then? In any case, this is what's happening, which is absolutely astounding. But there's something even more astounding that's about to happen. There's a Pirkei de Rebbe Eliezer written 2,000 years ago, and it says the following in Perek Lamed: "V'achras hayomim." It's amazing how the Midrashim call the shots 2,000 years later. It says, "V'achras hayomim," in the end of days, Osi Yishmael, the Arabs, will conduct 3 wars of terror against the world. It says that in the Midrash. But it's amazing that they knew it would be Yishmael. That's the incredible thing. In any case, just like they knew it would be Iran. What does that mean? So it mentions 2 acts of terror, but the third act of terror, it says, is that they will commit an act of terror against the great city of Rome. Rome? There's no Rome today, but there is. Who is Rome today? I said, Esav became Edom, Edom became Rome, Rome became Christianity, and Christianity is Western civilization. But who is Western civilization? The greatest of all, of course, is America. So against the great city of Rome is what? What is the greatest city of America? New York. What is the act of terror? The World Trade Center. It's astounding. And that's exactly what alerted America to the danger of Islam, which itself is incredible hashgacha. Because he made a terrible mistake, Osama bin Laden. He's a fool. Because he never should have done that. He should have consolidated his power and then do something to the West. Right? What do? All of a sudden he bombs the World Trade Center. So of course he's going to alert what? The whole Western world against what Islam can do. So all he did was alerted them and made them ready to take on Islam. But he wasn't ready for that. And in the end, of course, he got killed. Why did he do it? Because of something else that's going to happen shortly. But the main idea is that he did this in order to alert the West to Yishmael. And we will understand that. And by the way, the Hashem does that. For instance, I'll give you a classic example. World War II. Okay? The Nazis in Machshavim are killing the Jews. Right? And even Britain is finished. They bombed Britain, the Luftwaffe, and Britain was almost finished. If God hadn't done a miracle where Hitler said, forget about Britain, let's bomb Russia, or whatever, so the whole Luftwaffe turned around, and therefore Britain was able to be saved. There are so many miracles in World War II. But one of them is the decision of Japan to attack Pearl Harbor. What are you guys crazy? What are you doing? So there was a guy, the admiral, I think it's Admiral Yamamoto, who was the head of the Navy. There's a whole meeting, and he said, you guys are out of your mind. Don't do this. Don't bomb Pearl Harbor. And he made a famous statement. I only fear that this will awaken a sleeping giant, America, and fill it with a terrible resolve to destroy us. You don't fight. First consolidate all the bases in the Pacific, and then you worry about Pearl Harbor. But they didn't do that. So as a bunch of fools, they brought America into the war. And because America was brought into the war, obviously, they were able to destroy the Nazis. Of course, when you think about it, they're a bunch of idiots. Why do that now? Because they had no choice. Because it is the Rebbeinu Shalom that runs the world. And he put into the mind of the Japanese, to do this, and therefore they would automatically lose the war. And of course, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that was the end of the Japanese and so on. But it's the Rebbeinu Shalom that obviously orchestrates everything. In any case, this is what happened with also the World Trade Center. But here's what it says in the Medrash. After they will conduct the war of terror against the great city of Rome, which I am interpreting as New York and the World Trade Center, sounds pretty good. It says in this Medrash, incredible. It says, Umisham Yitzmach ben David. This will give rise or sprout the Mashiach ben David. Now, whenever it says Yitzmach, it doesn't mean Mashiach ben David, it means Mashiach ben Yosef, because he's the first Messiah. In any case, that he will sprout from this event. And it says, and he will raw, and he's going to watch. This is what the Medrash says. Mashiach ben Yosef, he's going to watch as Yishmael destroys Edom, Rome, and as Rome destroys Yishmael. What are we looking at here? We are looking at a clash of civilizations. That's basically what the Medrash says. That in the end of time, there's going to be a clash of civilizations. And each one is going to wipe out each other. Does it sound familiar? Hashem Yelochem Yelochem. Doesn't that sound familiar? Well, the Hashem says, hey, don't worry about it. Don't worry about Yishmael. I'll take care of them. Don't worry about Europe that is incredibly anti-Semitic. Don't worry about these guys, they will destroy each other. And that is also brought in Yoel, Perek Dalet, at the end of Malbim. In any case, it's predicting the clash of civilizations. Let me just backtrack for a minute to the blood moon, because I wanted to inject just a couple of ideas. Now you may say to me, that's very interesting. 4 blood moons, the tetrad, right? It happens once and 3 times in 500 years, and it's happening now. Is there a Jewish source for this? And you have a right to ask that. Where's the source in Judaism? Let me tell you something very, very interesting. If you look at Yoel, Perek Gimel, Pasuk Dalet, check it out. Here's what it says. Koyama, Yoel is saying in the name of God, because he's a prophet. Thus saith God, okay, I will blot out the sun. And by the way, there was a solar eclipse. I think that was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. I will blot out the sun, which is a solar eclipse, and I will turn the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of God, which is the Mashiach. There you are. There's a pasuk that says that in that year there will be a solar eclipse and that he will turn the moon to blood, which is incredible. Another idea, which is amazing, is that we are about to end Shemitah. We are about to enter Motzei Shemitah, right? Do you know that it says in the Gemara, Omar Rava, in the Gemara in Megillah, that the Mashiach comes in Motzei Shemitah? Amazing. And not only that, there are many people that hold that this Motzei Shemitah, the end of Shemitah, is a Yovel. And if that's true, that's even a greater reason why it could be nearing the end. So I wanted to tell you that it's not merely a blood moon. I don't know if any blood moon, tetrad, ever happened with these Shemitah years and so on. And we have the pasuk in Yoel. In any case, so what is being prophesied, actually, by the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer is the clash of civilization, which is how the Rebbe is going to bring everything to an end. And then it says he's going to watch as each one civilization is taking out each other. And then it says, Umisham, and from there, he will come to Eretz Yisrael. So it sounds like the Mashiach, Ben Yosef at least, is an American. Sorry to disappoint you. In any case, this is an incredible medrash. And that's the clash of civilization. You're watching it. Everybody knows there's something wrong here. Let me tell you something. Islam doesn't tolerate equality. Islam does not tolerate equality. What does that mean? That means either you're above them, you dominate them, or they dominate you. They cannot live with you as an equality. That's the concept of jihad. Jihad means that they need to conquer everything. So either they submit to you, or you submit to them. This is the concept of jihad in general. So therefore, what do we see? Is that in this great, incredible war, it will be the war, which is really the jihad, between Esav itself and also Edom. And that will signal, in many ways, the end, which is really, in many ways, an incredible the concept and so on. But like I say, you see the same thing, where God says, stand back and watch. I'll take care of them. I already took care of the Arabs. They're killing each other. And you should know one thing. Every morning I get up when I hear about what's happening in Syria. I mean, in a certain sense, it's tragic. I don't want to deny that it is tragic. When humans kill humans for nothing, it is tragic. I don't care who they are. Okay? However, looking at what the Arabs do to Jews, I pray that both sides should be victorious. What can I tell you? Now, however, Edom has a lot of merit. I want to tell you something. Edom has a lot of merit because America has incredible schools. America is an incredible country. It has never happened before. America is very good to the Jews. I mean, when you think about it, there's complete, what do you call it, freedom of religion. When was the last time that happened in a Christian country? They usually kill you because of that. I mean, talk about inquisitions, pogroms, right? Persecutions, expulsions. They're always butchering the Jews. So that's a tremendous thing for an Edomite country, a Christian country, to be this way. So for that reason, God always protects America, Edom, which is interesting. That's why He protects them, because they have the merit of helping the Jews learn, be religious. Tremendous. In fact, what's interesting, as an aside, but it's worth it, you ever wonder, why is Japan so rich? Why? Now, where did they come from? It's an island in the Pacific, and all of a sudden they have Japan. Well, not now, but it used to be the second greatest economy in the world. Now it's China. So maybe they moved down one place and so on. Okay, so that's the question. And that also is the concept of America. Why? Because in World War II, I want to show you something interesting. Japan was nothing. Remember the old days? I don't know if you remember. When it said made in Japan, everybody laughed. Well, now made in America, everybody laughs. But anyway, Japan was nothing before World War II. There was a feudal economy, a few whatever, and so on. All of a sudden, the Jews are running to Japan. Shanghai, which was under Japanese rule. Okay. and the Jews are running there. And all of a sudden the Japanese, they're allied with Hitler, right? And they don't know what to do with the Jews. Hitler's killing the Jews. Should we kill them too? They didn't know. So what they did, interesting enough, is they brought some of the Rabbonim, and they asked them, and one of them was the Am Yisrael Rebbe. It's famous. And they didn't know, so they asked the Am Yisrael. They said, why is Hitler killing you guys? You know? Because their question was, we're allies with Hitler, right? Maybe we should join. So the Am Yisrael Rebbe, as far as I remember, he said, this is divine providence, what God put into his mouth. He said, the reason why the Germans are killing the Jews is because the Jews are Orientals. They hate Orientals. So the Japanese said, excuse me, they what? They hate Orientals. But we're Orientals. Oh, really? That's interesting. And he saved the Jews. It's astounding. So what they did is they let the Jews alone. In fact, there were famous Japanese, what do you call it? Sujihara, yeah. That actually tremendously helped the Jews. So what did they do? They let the yeshiva in Shanghai, which itself had miracles. There's whole books written on it, so on and so forth. It comes out that Japan saved the Jews. And those Jews in Shanghai, in Japan, they came to America and they built all the tourist centers, right? So the Malach of Japan, I mean, imagine, because Japan has a Malach, he has a Tsar. He comes up in front of the Baruch and says, come on, the Torah in America, it's the Japanese. They're the greatest Marbitz Torah, right? Because all the tourist center is basically from what they did. So the Baruch says, you're right. So therefore, I will allow the Japanese, who have no natural resources, will become the second greatest economy in the planet. And for the Baruch it's no problem, even if you have no natural resources. And therefore, look at the reward that the Baruch gave Japan, but he had to give it right away. He couldn't wait because the time of the end is near. So instantly, basically after World War II, Japan became the second greatest economy. Why? Because they helped Jews learn. They are responsible for Torah. And the reward is infinite. So the Baruch said, I have to reward them. So that's why Japan, which was a nothing before World War II, has no natural resources, became the second greatest economy in the world. It's astounding. But that's their schar. So America shares that schar. Because the Jews learn, you have Lakewood, you have, Brooklyn, Flatbush, Borough Park. It's incredible what America has done. And therefore the Baruch has always protected them. And I believe that the Baruch will protect them even against the war against Yishmael. And that's one of the reasons why he alerted them. He warned them of who Yishmael is by the World Trade Center. It's not for nothing. Whatever God does is always multi-deterministic. There are always many reasons of why he does that. But I believe something else is going on. And that is that we have just been witness to an astounding decay of America, where the Supreme Court has permitted same-gender marriages, which is beyond belief. It is beyond belief for many reasons. One of them is that they have made this a constitutional law, which means you cannot change it because it's the Constitution, incredibly, unless you have a constitutional convention, which will never happen. So they have made same-gender marriage as a constitution, which is incredible. And how they did it is beyond belief. The arrogance of this guy, Arthur Kennedy, who was the swing vote, and so on. So the question is, why does the Russian allow that? He could stop it. And I want to tell you something. Don't fool around with the Russian when it comes to same gender. What do I mean? In 2005, there was a hurricane called Katrina. It hit New Orleans and it wiped out the city. And I remember then I was wondering, what is this? Do you know what it is for the Russian to wipe out a city? This isn't simple. What could have caused such a devastation? And it became apparent to me. I was reading an article in the newspaper, and there it was. On Monday, the storm or the hurricane hit New Orleans. Okay, it went over the levees, because New Orleans is below sea level, over the levees, and then on Tuesday, it drowned the whole city. Astounding. And you don't find that Russian destroys an American city like that. Why? Because on Wednesday, there should have been something in New Orleans. Because New Orleans, once a year, has a sort of like a holiday, and they call it Southern Decadence Day, where everything is permitted in terms of relationships, everything, and the police look away. You're looking at homosexuality, everything is going on in the streets. So imagine the Hashem says, listen, you want to play around with this, then do it in private. But if it's official in the sense that the police look away, I will not tolerate Mishkav Zocho, I will destroy the city. And that's very worrisome, because the Hashem destroyed New Orleans because of what was supposed to happen Wednesday. Of course, it never happened because the city was destroyed on Tuesday. That's very worrisome, that the Hashem will not tolerate that. And this is why Katrina happened, which of course they don't care and so on. Therefore, when this is in America, where the Supreme Court matters, and what the Supreme Court has done is terrible, because it has now permitted or legitimatized that type of same-gender relationship or whatever throughout the entire world, because everybody follows America. So in effect, they have demoralized the planet. Why does the Hashem allow that? I believe normally is protective of America because of the schos of Torah and freedom of religion and so on. Is because the Hashem has to equalize the schos of Edom and Yishmael, because there has to be a war. So what the Hashem has done is he has allowed America to introduce a terrible moral decay, which will produce a terrible prosecution against America, thereby equalizing it in terms of its stature in a court with Yishmael. Because if you'll notice, Yishmael kills same gender, you see. So in a certain sense, Yishmael is now equal to America in front of a court of Bezdin in Shemayim. It's interesting, because what America's done is in many ways is absolutely terrible. In any case, we see that we're coming up to a clash of civilizations. But what's interesting is we see a tremendous, what do you call, acceleration toward the end. And that's what's happening. We are accelerating toward the end. The question is, what do we do as Jews? What do we do as Jews? Can we stop Iran without a war? Can we bring the Mashiach? The answer is yes. Where do we have to look for the answer? The answer lies in the Torah itself. And I will tell you what the answer is. And I hope that people realize this. And this is the way to protect Israel from Iran and really to bring in Mashiach. How? It says in the Medrash, why did they get out of Egypt? So it said in the Medrash 3 times, Lo nikaru Yisrael miMitzrayim. The reason why the Jews got out of Egypt is because Shelo behen dilturya. There wasn't anybody speaking Lashon Hara. It's astounding. It says 3 times. That's why the Jews got out, because nobody spoke Lashon Hara. What does that mean? Because when you speak Lashon Hara, what you do is you introduce what's called prosecutions against yourself. Measure for measure. You want to speak Lashon Hara about somebody, you want to condemn that person, then the Sultan has the right to condemn you in a court of law in heaven. Measure for measure. That's the power of Lashon Hara. So the Baruch Hashem had a problem. What was the problem? The Jews were supposed to be there 400 years. They were only there 210. So the Sultan is screaming up there, you can't let them out. They got another 190 years to go. So what the Baruch Hashem needed, he needed the Jews to stop the prosecution. If a person doesn't talk Lashon Hara, there is no prosecution. It is very difficult for the Sultan, imagine, to prosecute you and therefore change your muzzle for the bad if you do not speak Lashon Hara. Only on certain times like Rosh Hashanah when it's the judgment day, but fundamentally a person who doesn't speak Lashon Hara is almost immune, from prosecution. It's incredible. It's the greatest single thing you can do for your muzzle. So therefore, since there was no prosecution in heaven, there was no prosecution, therefore God could take the Jews out and he didn't have to defend himself in a court of law. You see, because there's no prosecution. All of a sudden, what happens? Moshe Rabbeinu, and this is a Klei Yoko, check it out. Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Hashem by this burning bush, and the Hashem says, take my people out. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, I can't take them out, because the reason why they're in there is because they talk Lashon Hara. And we learned that by when Moshe Rabbeinu saw one Jew hitting another Jew, he said, Russia, why are you hitting your fellow Jew? So that person said, who made you the boss? Right? So Moshe Rabbeinu said a very strange statement. Surely the matter is known. What does that mean? So the pshat is, surely the matter that I killed the Egyptian will be known to Pharaoh, because these two guys are going to inform on me. That's pshat. But Rashi says that's not pshat. The Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu said to himself, why are the Jews the most persecuted nation in the world? And the answer was, surely the matter is known, surely the matter that they sin is known to heaven because they talk Lashon Hara. Because I see Jews talk Lashon Hara because these two guys are about to inform on me. So therefore Moshe Rabbeinu knew, so Rashi, that the reason why the Jews are in Egypt is because of Lashon Hara. They stopped, that's what the Medrash says. So when Moshe Rabbeinu said, you can't take them out because as far as he was concerned, he was gone from Egypt for 56 years, or rather 54 years, right? So he didn't know that they stopped. So Moshe said they stopped. And the sign was take your hand, put it inside, take it out, and it turned saras, because you get saras of Lashon Hara. Put it in, take it out, and it was cured. So Moshe, that was the sign, the Kleyopah says this, that the Jews do not speak Lashon Hara anymore. Take them out. What happens? Moshe Rabbeinu takes them out, and all of a sudden they're by Yam Suf, right? And all of a sudden, Egypt is one side, and the sea is the other. What do you think the Jews are going to do? Start talking Lashon Hara. God, how could you do this to us? There were no kfarim? You mean there were no graves in Egypt, right? That you had to take us into Egypt, in the wilderness to die? That's what they said. And they're going to start talking Lashon Hara against Moshe Rabbeinu, right? And God says, don't do this. Because if you start talking Lashon Hara again, then the Sultan is going to get up and say, hey, how'd you take him out? Bring him back. So the Baruch Shem incredible warns them. And he says, Hisyatzu ru'u, watch, stand, watch the salvation of God. Hashem yilochem lochem. I will fight for you. However, there's one condition. V'atem tachrishun. Shh. What is atem tachrishun? Don't talk Lashon Hara, or it's bad news for you guys. So the Baruch Shem is telling them, don't do this. It took years to get you out because it didn't talk Lashon Hara. The worst thing you want to do is to reverse the whole business. So the Baruch Shem is saying, you want to protect yourself? Don't speak Lashon Hara. Why? Because Lashon Hara creates incredible Avos Yisrael. And it creates Achdus. And it's Achdus that got the Jews ultimately out of Israel. The greatest sin of the Jew is Sinas Chinam, which is the opposite of Avos Yisrael, love of a Jew, and Achdus Yisrael, okay, and Lashon Hara, because that creates Sinas Chinam. And God, it's so bad that God has to warn them. Tachrishum, quiet, staggering. This is what will save us. It's a very important concept. It is the Achdus and the Avos Yisrael. This is what God wants. He doesn't want machlokas. He doesn't want Jews looking down on Jews, even if they're secular. You want to try to help the guy, fine. But you cannot look down at another Jew because he's secular. You don't know why. You don't know what temptations he goes through. You don't know who his parents were. You don't even know what his education was. A Jew is equal to another Jew. However, of course the Baruch Shem wants Jews to be Torah observant. Fine. But that doesn't make you superior to him in the eyes of God. It just guarantees you a place in the future world. Fine. But Jews are all princes and princesses of God. Period. And they always remain so. This is what the Baruch Shem wants. To such an extent where he warns everybody, Tachrishum, be silent. The secret of destroying Iran, the secret of protecting all of us, we need to have the Achdus and the Avos Yisrael. It's critical. Just like it happened then. And just like Shmiras Haloshim, it's what got the Jews out of Egypt, as the Medrash says. It will get us out of this Golus. Like the Prophet Chaim says, the reason why the Mashiach doesn't come is because of Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara, Sinas Chinam, Machlokas, Gaiva, elitism, where you think you are superior, and the other Jew is, who is he? He doesn't put tefillin on the way I do. Who is this guy? That's the wrong attitude. And I'm telling you, the secret of destroying Iran is the dibur, is the peh. If a Jew observed the mitzvah of Lashon Hara, then you will see his Sirat Zvarun. I mean, God is doing this. Just like Syria will destroy themselves, I guarantee you, Iran will destroy each other, and then we won't need all this business of clash of civilizations and so on. And because the Muslim is no problem. In a flash, he can have all the Arabs killing all the Arabs. Not a problem for him. And it's already here, because the people are sick and tired of the mullahs of Iran. They don't want a theocracy. Iranians are intelligent people, and they're not Arabs. They're Muslims, but they're Persians, and they're bright. They don't want these mullahs. What can they do? Because if they step out of line, they will be killed. What do you think it takes to Muslim to turn the whole thing and give success to the people, to overthrow the entire theocracy of Persia? Nothing. It can happen overnight, just like the Berlin Wall collapsed almost overnight. It's not a big deal for him. That's what protect the Jews. And that's very important. And like I say, it has a biblical source, where the Muslim had to warn Klal Yisrael, Atem Tachrishum. Like, what is that? Don't speak Lashon Hara, because that's what got you out. The last thing you want to do is introduce or reintroduce that type of thing, which got you into Egypt in the first place. What have I done? I don't know. What I've tried to do is introduce you to a whole different mindset, a whole different way of thinking, that everything you see has a divine purpose. It's a chess game. But most of the time we don't see it, because there are huge time lapses that happen between the pieces, the movement. But as you see, I've gone literally from the Sultan dying, okay, to now with all the events, how you can see how they shape up. This hopefully will mechazik your emunah. This will strengthen your belief that God has not abandoned the Jews. On the contrary, the problem is, as far as we're concerned, is that he operates undercover for obvious reasons. Because if the Sultan gets wind of what's happening, he's not going to want any of this to happen, and he will prosecute. But make no mistake, there is an incredible divine events happening that is bringing to the Mashiach. And I will give you one more, and I end this Shia. There's a Zohar. It says the following, that Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, most people think Mashiach ben David will come, and then there'll be a resurrection of the dead, which will happen instantly. So the Zohar says that the resurrection of the dead, which happens after the entry of Mashiach ben David, will take 210 years. Wow. Now we know that this world ends in the year 6,000, as the Gemara says. That this world will last 6,000 years, 1,000 years connected each day, 6 days, 6,000 years. So, if it ends, or if Mashiach ben David comes and then Tchias HaMesim, which takes 210 years, therefore, Mashiach ben David arrives in the year 2030, which is 15 years from now, according to that Zohar. That is frightening. It's astounding. According to that Zohar, Mashiach will be here in 15 years. And that is basically this is Zohar. That's one of the reasons why you see such an incredible acceleration. What's happening, it's unbelievable. In the last 30 years, you can't believe what's happening. Between the World Trade Center, the Arabs, Europe, the bankruptcies, Obama, it's like, what's going on here? And the answer is because God is tired to say that, okay? He wants to bring the Geula. He really wants to bring it. But what he's doing is he's accelerating it. So what you're looking at, what has happened in the last 30 years in Jewish history, takes hundreds and hundreds of years to happen. Even one event takes hundreds of years. But we are rapidly approaching the end. And when you put it all together, all the messianic indications, how Israel is now coming out and becoming a major exporter of energy. The Arabs are collapsing. America is diminished. Just take a look at, and not all the Jews are coming out of the land because the Golas is ending, because the nations that persecute the Jews cannot hold them anymore. Russia gave up its Jews. Syria gave up its Jews. The Jews are coming in all over the world to settle in Israel. And that's why it's amazing to watch that this government doesn't get it. There's so many people piling in Israel. They really have to build more apartments and houses. There's so much that has to be done to bring them in and allow them to come in and so on. But we are watching an enormous acceleration. And according to that Zohar, we've got what? We've got 15 years to watch. And let me tell you what happens in those 15 years. 1, the rise of Yishmael, which we've seen. The fall of Yishmael is 2, the war between Yishmael and Edom, the great clash. That's 3. The entry of Mashiach ben Yosef, the end of the Golus, the beginning, the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay? And not only that, but the revelation of the Messianic light, which is a whole different share of what that is. And then you have the war of Gog and Magog. That's right. Gog from the land of Magog will attack Jerusalem because and that's a Messianic war because it's against Mashiach ben Yosef because they realize or they see that their way of life is ending, and it's Judaism that is the top of everything. And then you have Mashiach ben David that will wipe out Gog, and then you have the beginning of Tchias HaMesim. Can you imagine what has to happen in the next 15 years if this Zohar is accurate in the sense that it's happening what the Zohar says? It's astounding. In any case, what we have to remember is several ideas. 1 is to get our priorities straight. If we're so close to the Mashiach, we need to do tshuva. We need to realize that what we've been witnessing for thousands of years is about to end. And in the Messianic era, it is an era that nobody can comprehend. Such is the difference between the Messianic era and what is happening now. But like I say, it's going to be filled with a lot of tsaros, a lot of wars, and so on. And therefore, we need to be careful and protect ourselves. And like I said, I think the most important thing to do is protect ourselves is against machlokas, lashon hara, and so on. And therefore, it's critical that everybody learn the laws of lashon hara. And by the way, why is lashon hara, or why is shmiras lashon all around? Did you ever notice that 50 years ago, you told a guy, you're talking lashon hara, he says, excuse me, lashon hara, what's that? 50 years ago. Today, you talk lashon hara, it's very possible that the one you're saying to says to you, I don't want to really hear this because it's lashon hara. Why? Why is there such an awareness? Why is that? Why did the Chavetz Chaim write the Shmiras HaLashon? And the answer is because the refuah has to come before the makkah. The cure has to become before the blow. And the cure of the Messianic time is Shmiras HaLashon. Therefore, the Chavetz Chaim had an incredible intuition, whatever he had, that he needed to write the Sefer, which is the Bible of Shmiras HaLashon, guard your mouth from evil. This isn't an accident. Nothing is an accident. But remember, he started writing it in 1867, and then in 1871 is he really began to write the Sefer. And guess what? In 1871 is when Bismarck in Germany declared Germany to be a republic, and that began the might of Germany ultimately to initiate World War I and World War II. So the Chavetz Chaim had to write the Sefer Shmiras HaLashon, right, as the refuah that will come before the makkah. All these terrible wars ultimately to be in place. And that is why there's an incredible consciousness of Shmiras HaLashon. This itself is not an accident. Nothing is an accident. Therefore, on the contrary, let us be mindful, do tshuva now is elo, to do tshuva, be careful about speech, to learn, obviously to learn as much Torah as you can, and to influence others. And if we do that, then we will watch as mamash, the incredible bracha, that the Baruch Shem will say, hey, stand back, watch what I do. And that is one of the greatest miracles ever known, because the Baruch Shem is a very private individual. He never openly displays, except in pivotal times in history. And to see him display the might of God in front of your eyes, and just no way to subject it to any kind of alternative interpretation, is probably one of the greatest things we will ever see. Let's hope it'll happen in our time.
Amen.
To Korah B'Yameinu. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. If anybody wants any CDs of Shuma I've given,